This video contains spoilers from the Shadowlands alpha, including the Revendreth storyline and confirmed jailer model from data mining. So if you don't want to know about those things, just don't watch this video, okay? Thanks. Okay, bye. Love you, bye. Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and today we are talking World of Warcraft Shadowlands, and we are talking Dreadlords, or the Nathrezim. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hang on Taliesin, I'm not a total idiot, I've been playing this game for a little while now, I like to think I have some idea of what's going on, and I know full well that Dreadlords are a demon thing, like a Burning Legion and Sargeras thing. They were all over the place in the Burning Crusade, and Legion being all green and horny and stuff, and I'm pretty sure we put pay to all of that when Sargeras got, and look, there's no nice way of saying this, sucked off Azeroth by his newly reborn Titan buddies, and that was the end of the Burning Crusade. Velen sighed, that was that, and there was no more demons. Is this an old video? Did I accidentally click on a T&E episode from 2017 or something? And that's actually a fair point, because yes, the Burning Crusade is over, and we've moved on to other big bads threatening our pixely existence since, in the Old Gods and Scary Silhouettes. But you know, it turns out that Shadowlands might have more of a demotic influence than we were first expecting, which has come to light since the alpha went live and players were able to gallivant around new leveling zone Revendreth, home of the Venthyr and led by the first ever Venthyr, Sire Denathrius. Because the Shadowlands may well be a place exclusively for mortal souls, and it may be older than any memory, and it may be seemingly unconnected to our favourite demon boys, but there's plenty of compelling evidence that suggests Sire Denathrius may in fact be a Nathrezim, or as they are more commonly known in WoW lore, a Dreadlord. And what exactly is that evidence? Well, for one, there's the evidence of our own eyes. He looks like a Dreadlord. He appears to use a male Draenei rig for his pose and movement, but upon looking at Denathrius, the very first thing most people will have thought was, wow, that is a daring plunging neckline, my friend, but you really put it off, fair play. But the second thing we all thought was, oh cool, look, a Dreadlord. He has the grey vampiric complexion, he has the horns and the hooves, things that none of the other Venthyr have, even though they were apparently created in his image. So, you know, the horns and hooves aren't random, they're worth mentioning. There's the fact that he's come dressed pretty much exactly like the Dreadlord Tichondrius in Warcraft 3, except, you know, Tichondrius on an especially daring Saturday night on his way to the discotheque. And true, he's got 5 fingers as opposed to the traditional Dreadlord 4, and he apparently has no wings, but I mean, Dreadlords are quite famous for being quite deceitful and not being all they appear. And it wouldn't be a massive surprise if when we fight Denathrius in the first Shadowlands raid, he were to leap up in the air and reveal a big old pair of demon wings, would it? Because, oh yeah, that's another thing, he's also very deceitful and tries to manipulate us into doing terrible things, which is what Dreadlords are famous for doing. Oh, and sorry, how is the Dreadlords often described? Oh yeah, as being vampiric, and, well, you know, I don't think it's exactly fashioning a tinfoil bunker here to speculate that someone called Denathrius, who lives in Castle Nathria, might have some connection to the Nathrezim who live on Nathreza, especially when, you know, he looks exactly like a Nathrezim, and especially when other characters refer to him as the Lord of Dread. And because I'm an amazing detective, basically like Batman or Columbo, I managed to work out, after literal hours with an online anagram finder, that Lord of Dread does sound quite a lot like Dreadlord. So whereas obviously there is no explicit confirmation as yet, it's a pretty safe bet that either Denathrius is a Dreadlord, or was originally a Dreadlord, or that even if he's not, Blizzard definitely want us to think that he is. And that's actually really important for a number of reasons. There's the fact that demons aren't supposed to go to the Shadowlands. Steve Danusa said in an interview on our own stream that the Shadowlands is for mortal souls and that demons go somewhere else. There's the fact that the Nathrezim had a hand in the Lich King's Helm of Domination and Frostmourne. There's the fact that the Nathrezim are actually criminally underappreciated by most WoW players, often being pigeonholed as being pretty exclusively aligned with Fel and the Legion, whereas actually they are one of the most versatile and knowledgeable races in the Warcraft canon, having their spindly fingers in pies almost across the entire cosmology chart. And with Ian Hazzikostas saying in a very recent interview that the Shadowlands were fashioned by something, and implying that we would find out exactly what that something is, I'm suddenly very interested as to why Sire Denathrius might be a Dreadlord, and what that might mean for what the Shadowlands even is. So join us as we go on a proper old school T&E lore dive and ask, who are the real Nathrezim? What are they doing in the Shadowlands? And why are they helping the jailer? Okay, go, 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 go. So let us begin by having a quick recap on what we know about the Nathrezim in the existing lore, just so that we're all on the same page, because there's a few base characteristics that I believe all Nathrezim share, which may help inform any speculation that we may want to apply to Sire Denathrius' motivations and allegiances, and some of these motivations might surprise you. And when it comes to World of Warcraft lore, then I find a good rule is to place the most importance on the most recent lore and then work your way back. Quite simply, in a canon so vast and complex that it has been shaped and influenced by so many different hands, the more recent a source of lore is, the more chance it has of actually being correct, because no one has had a chance to accidentally or purposely retcon it yet. So the Nathrezim are demons, which, according to Chronicle, means they originate from the Twisting Nether. In the WoW universe, your two main forces are the light, which is dynamic and energetic, and the void, which is vampiric and devouring, and the tension between these two growing forces created essentially a bunch of big bangs, which brought about our physical universe into existence. But where the edges of the light and the void bleed together is another plane of existence called the Twisting Nether, which is where demons and their worlds are formed, and who are capable of clawing their way into our plane of reality. We generally associate demons with the Fel, because that's what many of them wield, but it's worth noting that Chronicle describes the Nether as being filled with highly volatile energy, but doesn't say Fel specifically, and doesn't imply that it's anything exclusively. And as we shall see, Nathrezim in particular are adept at harnessing many different forms of power. They are perhaps most naturally predisposed to the shadow. And in Chronicle, the Nathrezim are introduced on page 21 in The Rise of Demons and are described thusly. The Nathrezim, otherwise known as Dreadlords. Cunning and manipulative, they dedicated their existence to mastering the arts of shadow. The Nathrezim relished infiltrating mortal civilizations, sowing unrest and turning nation against nation. As these societies devolved and crumbled from within, the Nathrezim would corrupt their populations, twisting innocence into new and horrific breeds of demon. And it's probably this passion for the delicacies of the vampiric void which is why Dreadlords tend to rock a rather Transylvanian-esque appearance with their ashen skin and fangs. Their love of manipulation is a theme throughout WoW media. In Death is Contagious, the first issue of the Ashbringer comic series, we learn that they refer to themselves in their own language as Thal Kitun, which means unseen guests. Their language, which we learn from the Warlock Green Fire quests in Mists of Pandaria, is rarely ever spoken outside their own homeworld. We hear that they were once an enlightened and powerful race. Their skill in summoning and gateway magics was unsurpassed by any in the Great Dark Beyond. And more on that homeworld later, because it was the Nathrezim, along with the Infernals and the Pit Lords, who are described as Chronicle as being in the first wave of demons clawing their way out of the Twisting Nether and causing nonsense in our reality, which brought them to the attention of the Titans, who elected Sargeras and later his sidekick Agramar as the universe's defenders against these new evils. Demons formed in the Twisting Nether, though, can only be permanently killed in the Nether, otherwise they just respawn over the centuries and come straight back to be fought again. And so Sargeras got into the habit of imprisoning demons on his prison planet of Mar Doom, a prison world in which we have to assume the Nathrezim were pretty common inmates. And the Nathrezim played an important part in perhaps the most important moment in WoW's universe history. The Void Gods, wanting to harness the power of a Void Titan all of their own, have spewed out old gods at random into the Great Dark, hoping that some of them would randomly land on unborn Titans and corrupt the sleeping world soul within. This is exactly what happened to Azeroth, but before Azeroth, there was an unnamed planet, which I'm going to call Dionys. When Sargeras came across the unborn Dionys, he found a world soul crying out in torment, and the planet completely covered in and corrupted by the old gods. But of course, Sargeras had no idea what was going on. He didn't know what the Void Gods were at that stage, nor their plan. But he found a group of Nathrezim on Dionys, who had been drawn to the planet to study the shadowy void energies there, and tortured them until they informed him of the whole Void God, Old God, Corrupt the Titan plan. A revelation which flat out terrified Sargeras so much that he eventually reasoned the only way to save all life in the universe from the inevitable fate of being consumed by the Void Gods was to destroy all life in the universe. So he destroyed Dionys with his rather familiar sword, and then released all of the prisoners on Mardoon to form his ready-made demon army and enlisted them on his burning crusade to eradicate all life before the Void Gods could get their hands on it. All of this seemingly based on what the Nathrezim had told him. The Nathrezim, remember, who pride themselves on deceit and manipulation. But whatever, there is an in-game book in WoW called Sargeras and the Betrayal that says the Nathrezim were actually brought into the Burning Legion much later by Kil'jaeden after Sagi enlisted the Eredar. I don't think it's worth trusting an in-game book over Chronicle though, as it's much more likely to be inaccurate anyway. It was literally written by some mortal dude on Azeroth, but especially because that particular book has already been rewritten in-game once. Back in vanilla, Sargeras and the Betrayal used to say that the Eredar were the ones that corrupted Sargeras, which we know is not true. But either way, Kil'jaeden was eventually put in charge of the Nathrezim, and it seems that they embraced their new fell alignment pretty wholeheartedly. Their home planet of Castle Nathreza is described in the Illidan novel as having a burning fell sun, and it was on this planet that they built the archives of the Burning Crusade, detailing all of the Legion's many twisted exploits and triumphs. More on that home planet later, but it's as soldiers of the Legion that we are most familiar with Dreadlords, and they have been a thorn in the side of Azeroth's inhabitants for millennia, Tichondrius being a major player in the War of Ancients and the Third War, where the Nathrezim were particularly involved in Kil'jaeden's creation of the Lich King, Arthas's fall and the scourging of Lordran, and the eventual rise of Sylvanas as leader of the Forsaken. Their home planet was destroyed by Illidan's Stormrage, after he and his Illidari black opsed onto Nathreza via a portal from Outland and stole the Seal of Argus from their archives before overloading the portals on their way out again, an action which Chronicle says tore apart the planet and killed every Dreadlord on it, which would seem to be the end of Nathreza. But we know that that planet still exists in some form, because in Antorus, Portal Keeper Hazabel opens a portal to Nathreza, and a Dreadlord called Lord Eilgar comes out of it. So by the events of Legion, clearly other Nathrezim have begun to repopulate that broken world, who we still have to assume are still out there, just waiting for when Blizz decide it might be fun to jump into the Vindicar and kick some Dreadlords around again. And from this history of the Nathrezim, there are indeed a few traits which stand out. So ladies and gentlemen, allow me to present to you the main characteristics of the Dreadlords. Number one, they are not very loyal. Now this may sound like a controversial one, because in Warcraft 3, a big fuss is made about how Dreadlords just do not kill each other, which is why it's such a big deal when Varimathras does kill his own brothers. But I'd argue that this kind of betrayal isn't as unusual to the Nathrezim as Varimathras makes out. Don't forget, the Dreadlords used to be all about the Void and Shadow until Sargeras came along, when they were more than willing to swap sides to the Fel and to the Legion, whose whole objective was to stop the Void Gods. And then, as loyal Legion troops, a whole bunch of Nathrezim defected to the Illidari, whose whole purpose is to defeat the Legion. In fact, those Illidari Nathrezim helped Illidan get to Nathreza and destroy their own home planet, along with all the Nathrezim on it, which again, kind of goes against the whole Dreadlords don't kill Dreadlords thing, really. Shortly after betraying and killing his brothers to join Sylvanas, Varimathras famously betrayed Sylvanas. At least one Nathrezim we know of betrayed all of the above and joined the Army of the Light and kills Nathrezim all the time. And going back to Sire Denathrius here, but in Shadowlands, he is quite willing to betray his own children, the Venthyr, and use them as inhuman batteries to help power his new bestie, the Jailer. Basically what I'm saying is, don't trust a Dreadlord, even if you are one. Number two, they are very good at crafting cool gear. It was the Nathrezim who crafted Apocalypse, the unholy Death Knight artifact weapon, which is all kinds of insanely powerful, and in established lore, they were also responsible for the Helm of Domination and Frostmourne, which we know were crafted in a rune forge in the Shadowlands. Now, recent interviews with various devs have suggested that Shadowlands may reveal that the Dreadlords simply stole those items from the runesmith, but we haven't yet had that confirmed, and furthermore, we don't know that the runesmith isn't a Nathrezim, and in either case, the Dreadlords were able to get into the Shadowlands even to steal them, and it's their ability to come and go from the Shadowlands that I would argue is the really interesting thing here. Which leads us to point 3, Nathrezim are unnervingly proficient in all different kinds of power. Shadow and Fel we've already covered, but as we've seen with Lothraxion, the Protection Paladin, they are also capable of becoming incredibly powerful wielders of the light. And the fact that they can enter the Shadowlands when they really shouldn't be able to suggests that they know their way around death magic too, as does the fact that Tichondrius and the other Dreadlords commanded the Scourge and Plague of Undeath in Lordaeron during the Third War, as does the fact that in the Demon Soul novel and the Broken Shore in Legion, Nathrezim are also literally shown as being necromancers, as does the fact that Nathrezim appears to be literally in charge of an entire Shadowlands covenant. So that's Shadow, Fel, Holy, Death, and if you include Jaina, Arcane. Dreadlords have covered. The Nathrezim have found a home in nearly every section of the cosmology chart. And quite frankly, the only other race in the whole of Warcraft as versatile as that is, well, us, the player characters. And you wouldn't want to mess with us, right? Point 4 is my favorite though. The Nathrezim are jailers. It was the Dreadlord Vargath who acted as jailer to Maiev when Illidan put her on lockdown. It was Tichondrius and other Dreadlords who acted as jailers to Ner'zhul's Lich King. And of course, Denathrius looks after Revendreth, which is where souls that have sins to atone for are sent to see out their sentence and serve penance until they're in a state to be sent to one of the other covenants to see out the rest of eternity in peace. All of which leads us to the big question. Who is Sire Denathrius and why is he teaming up with the jailer? So now we've got a better idea of what makes the Nathrezim tick. What is the significance of Sire Denathrius being one, if indeed he is one, which he definitely is? What led him to be here in charge of Revendreth and the daddy of all its inhabitants? Wherever he came from, there is no doubt that Denathrius has been in the Shadowlands for a really long time, and his sheer age could explain the physical differences between him and more familiar Dreadlords. Could Denathrius have been part of the enlightened and powerful race described in the Green Fire quests, before the Nathrezim pursuit of the powers of the Shadow and the Void twisted them into something more heartless and grotesque? I just want to put it out there that I think it's also possible Nathrezim was not a world formed in the Twisting Nether, but which became connected to it later, like Draenor or Argus. So is it possible that the Nathrezim are originally from our reality and used to be a mortal race whose souls therefore used to get sent to the Shadowlands instead of back to the Nether like they do now? Could that explain how Denathrius found his way there, and how Nathrezim was still able to break through the veil and into the moor to the Forge to steal the Helm of Domination and Frostmourne from the Runeforge? Or is it even possible that the Nathrezim were there at the formation of the Shadowlands? Did they help build it somehow? They are masters of all different kinds of power and are able to exist in many different planes of existence. It might not be as crazy as it sounds. And with that in mind, why is Denathrius helping the jailer? And can we get nice and spoilery for a second and look at what Ian recently confirmed is the in-game model for the jailer? Because it's this guy. And look, I'm not suggesting for a moment that this dude looks like a Nathrezim, okay? I'm not. But he certainly shares the ashen complexion and the vampiric tendencies. And if Denathrius is like an older, earlier version of the Dreadlords that we see roaming about now, then it's not hard, if we really wanted to get silly, to imagine how the jailer could feasibly be an even earlier version of the Nathrezim than Denathrius is, like even further back on the evolutionary scale. They share the hands and the ears and the skin. If you wanted to, and based on physical attributes alone, it wouldn't be impossible to argue that Denathrius is the missing link on the evolutionary scale between the jailer and the Dreadlords that we know today. Could the Nathrezim's natural proficiency as jailers have seen them take those roles when the Shadowlands was first formed? And something that's very important to bear in mind here, I'm not pretending to know any of the answers here, obviously, because for me, lore speculation is always more about asking exciting questions that get people thinking than actually getting behind a particular answer or headcanon. But when you start to think about the possibility of the Nathrezim having a connection to the Shadowlands that could go further back than their connection to the Nether and the Fel, and maybe even further back than their obsession with Shadow and the Void, which might even stretch back to the building of the Shadowlands, which is as old as mortal life and therefore older than the Titans themselves, then you're left with an extra tantalizing question. If the Nathrezim helped to forge the machine of death, then why are they now trying to break it? Is this a change of heart? A growing of their selfish greed for anima that has built over the millennia to a genuine takeover attempt now? Or maybe it comes from a more selfless angle, where they have discovered the machinery of the mortal afterlife isn't working as it should, that the people in charge themselves are misusing it and need to be stopped. Or maybe their involvement in the formation of the Shadowlands was a very long game and dreadlordy type trick in the first place, and that this moment of the jailer making his move was always part of the plan. And then there's maybe my favourite question of all. If those dev interviews are correct and the Nathrezim originally stole Frostmourne and the Helm of Domination from the Shadowlands rather than make them themselves, then who was Frostmourne and the Helm of Domination actually forged for? The obvious answer would be the jailer, especially as Frostmourne is all about stealing souls, because, you know, the jailer is all about stealing souls too. What could he achieve if he were able to forge himself another Frostmourne? I would love to hear your answers to that, as well as any other suggestions you have as to why there seems to be such a strong dreadlord presence in the Shadowlands. I always say let us know in the comments below, but I mean it especially in this case, because I can't wait to see what you come up with, and I can't wait to see what more there is to learn as Shadowlands unfolds. And thank you for joining us today. If you liked this video, don't thank us, thank our patrons who continue to give their actual real life money to make all of our videos happen. Guys, you know who you are, and thank you, because without you, there would be a whole lot less Taliesin and Evitel. If you'd like to join in these conversations as we have them live on stream, then check out our Twitch channel, which we broadcast on between 3 and 5 times a week. If you didn't like this video, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Steven. No, my name is Taliesin, from me and Evitel and Nyrin too. Cheerio.